seems like I'm having a case of Deja review here, but this in-depth look is in fact for an entirely brand new product. Appearances can be deceiving, and despite it looking identical to its predecessor, the recently released Retroid Pocket 3 Plus joins the fight with a boost in energy. It's very clear that 2022 has been very exciting for handheld enthusiasts, with no signs of slowing down for the new year. It's the first time ever I'm following up an in-depth look with another on the channel, and so just a short 3 months later, the great budget handheld has returned sporting some new colors, a new processor, and perhaps some other new tricks. So what does the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus offer? And this time around, how does it follow up to the original Retroid Pocket 3? And is this the revision that will solidify it as the budget handheld king? I am Rob, the Retro Tech Dad, and let's explore the new Pocket 3 Plus from Retroid. It's that time right after the intro rolls for me to drop the specs on this device. The Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, like the 3, features a 4.7-inch 16:9 touchscreen display at 750 by 1334 resolution, which according to Retroid tops out at 450 nits. It features a more powerful UNISOC Tiger T618 with 8 cores. Unlike its predecessor, the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus only comes in one configuration featuring 4GB of LPDDR4 RAM at 1866MHz and 128GB of eMMC storage. Additionally, it comes with the option to expand storage using the available microSD slot. Out of the box, the device comes preloaded with Android 11. A higher capacity battery than the Retroid Pocket 3, coming at 4500 mAh and with support for fast charging. The Retroid Pocket 3 Plus returns with some new and some original colors. This time around we have 16-bit, 16-bit US, black, indigo, retro, orange, clear purple, and finally clear blue. The device is available for purchase now for $149 US plus any applicable tax and shipping fees. It's time for one of my favorite parts of these videos, and that's of course the unboxing. The box should look quite familiar to those who had a Retroid Pocket 3. Here you can see the 8 color options available for the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, and the one that I did order was the clear purple. I just couldn't resist that color, which calls back to my childhood. I am glad that despite the box looking the same, Retroid did at least print 3 Plus on the box, unlike GPD did with the XP and just reused their packaging materials. Time to cut that seal away, and always be careful with pointed objects. I clearly almost stabbed my packaging here. The magnetic fold-out packaging makes a return, which I commented in the past how much I really like. So this time around, I don't have as many goodies in my box. I'll talk about that a little more later. Alright, so let's slide this out of here and check out what we get in this package. Okay, let's take the Retroid out of its coffin and stick it to the side while we check out the captivating user's manual, which I feel is less a user's manual and more of a spec sheet on the device. How very exciting, another USB Type-C to USB-A cable. I do like the purple accent and the Type-A end, but am I the only one who is literally buried in these cables at this point? Let's get the included screen protector out of the bag so we can move along to the best part of this unboxing, the device reveal. And there is the clear purple peeking through, and my first impression is just how great this color is. I don't know why, but I love these transparent colors. So let's take a tour around the new Retroid Pocket 3 Plus and check out everything on the device. Starting from the bottom, we have the downward firing stereo speakers, USB Type-C port for charging and data, 3.5mm headphone jack, and lastly the microSD slot for storage expansion. On the left side we have the volume up and down rocker and part of the stacked shoulder buttons peeking through. Might as well test them out and see how they feel, and they are pretty much identical to what was on the original Retroid Pocket 3. I know a lot of people really like the stacked shoulder button configuration. Very much like its predecessor, everything presses down nicely and the finishing and build quality is very good here. I am able to press down on the shoulder buttons from any location, so if you have longer or shorter fingers, there is no issue here. Top side we have the power button, micro HDMI out, and the start and select buttons, which certainly has a divide among users. Personally, I have adapted to that setup and don't find it troublesome at all to reach. And now we have the right shoulder buttons. Again, I am not noticing any weird finishing or stickiness. They feel responsive to my actions. And on the right side, we have the lone home button for quickly getting back to Android. On the back side, you can see the vents and the entire metal plate for heat dispersion, similar to the original Retroid Pocket 3, which I partly disassembled in my video. This is where I think the see-through aesthetic is really slick. I just love admiring tech like that. There's something very cool about it. I will comment that the plastic feels different than the Retroid Pocket 3's. Now I'm assuming that this has to do with the translucent plastic and that the regular solid colors probably feel like my retro-colored Retroid Pocket 3. Finally, let's go over to the front and start with the left side and check out the analog stick, which feels again identical to its predecessor. The directional pad feels a little bit better on this unit, which I believe has to do with the switch to membrane over dome switches, and it does seem to rock better than my original unit. I really love the subtle clickiness of the D-pad. It presses down well in each direction. The pivot is not the best I've used, but for most it won't be an issue. So something interesting to note here, it looks like Retroid did reuse the face for the shell, and it doesn't say 3+ on it, so just be careful if you ever end up picking up a secondhand unit without packaging that isn't one of the new colors to make sure it is in fact a 3+. So now trying out the buttons, I've been very curious about these as I never did install the conductive rubber kit included with my original Retroid Pocket 3. I was very happy with the original setup, and again I do like clicky Vita style buttons, but whoa, these are different feeling than the dome switches on my original Retroid Pocket 3. You can see how much more travel the conductive rubber has when pressing down on them, and these buttons are stiff but they do press down well. They sit above the face of the shell when fully pressed down. You can hear how satisfying these sound as well. So let's quickly compare the difference between my Retroid Pocket 3 with the dome switches. You can see how short the travel is, and it's much more clicky, again, reminiscent of something like a Vita or a Switch Joy-Con. While we're on the whole comparing devices, I wanted to show my Anbernic RG353V, which I never did cover on the channel due to it arriving when I was out on the East Coast for a trip. Anyways, I mainly wanted to show the differences in the purple tones between the translucent shells. The Retroid Pocket's purple is definitely deeper and richer looking. Now I really do wish I had my old Game Boy Color to compare, since I am not sure which one is actually closer to that original color. Unfortunately, I only have this very cool modded Game Boy Color to display here. In this next segment, we are going to do our usual comparisons for weight, size, and some measurements. First up, with the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, setting the baseline here at a very minuscule 8.3 ounces or 236 grams. Next up is the Anbernic Win600 coming in at 495 grams, or just under 18 ounces. And the Steam Deck weighing in at 678 grams, or 1.5 pounds. And the popular Nintendo Switch at 14 ounces, or about 400 grams. And to no surprise, the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus will definitely be one of the lighter devices you will come across. So now for some size comparisons. Don't mind the WinMax 2 in this shot, it's obviously feeling a little envious of the Retroid Pocket 3's diminutive size. Likewise for the Steam Deck, which always seems to find its way around to these size comparisons, and would you look at that, the 3 Plus is hiding away under the Steam Deck here. Now here's a better look at the 3 Plus compared to the massive footprint of the Steam Deck, and obviously no comparison here when it comes to portability. Let's compare this to some other well-known entities like the Nintendo Switch, which obviously is much larger than the 3 Plus. You can see that in terms of thickness they are quite similar, and even the shoulder button arrangements and width are very similar as well. And that seems like the perfect segue to introduce a new tool that I finally remembered to pick up and use here for this video. The digital caliper will be useful in getting some actual numbers to back up the measurements and comparisons being made here. So let's get some numbers on the Pocket 3 Plus. I wanted to measure the size of the face buttons here so we can get an idea of how they compare to some other devices and so that you, the viewer, can get a better sense of size. The 3 Plus face buttons measure about 6.5 millimeters in diameter, and the analog sticks are roughly 13 millimeters in diameter. So let's grab one of my Joy-Cons, and you can see that the analog sticks are slightly larger, coming in at under 15mm in diameter, and the same can be said for the face buttons of the Joy-Cons, which are slightly larger at 7mm in diameter. Lastly, I wanted to show the Win600 face buttons, which Ambernick tends to use larger face buttons for their devices, and these come in at a little under 8mm in diameter. Finally, returning to the thickness of the Switch and Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, I am quite proud to say that my guess of these two devices having similar thickness ended up being pretty spot on. And lastly, like my Pocket 3 review, I wanted to demonstrate the pocketability of the 3 Plus, and just like its predecessor, it's a fairly thin device and really not much larger than my iPhone 14 Pro, so fitting it into your pockets shouldn't be much of a concern. In fact, I will demonstrate with both the Retroid Pocket 3 and 3 Plus that they have no trouble fitting inside my dad's sweatpants, and in a very rare moment, I seem to have captured all 3 of my dogs on camera. Okay, let's get this powered on and set up for the first time. Now, as I mentioned before, this comes with Android 11 out of the box, and this setup process is pretty much identical to what we have seen before with the Retroid Pocket 3. Quickly running through this, you will go through the usual Android setup, and then you'll have the choice to use the Retroid launcher or head straight into standard Android. And no need to worry, you can change any of these settings later on. So let's take a quick look at the Retroid launcher, which is unique to Retroid Pocket devices and is not a bad front end for someone not wanting to invest a lot of time getting things organized. So one of the first things you'll want to do here is go into setup and then choose create ROM folders so that you have the default folders automatically created to place your files. You can tell the launcher to use the internal storage or the micro SD card if you have one inserted into your device. Now the next thing you can do is check off which systems you want displayed. So head over into systems and select the platforms that you are interested in. For the sake of this video, I will just select a few consoles to show how it looks in the front end. Simply hitting quit will take you out of this launcher and into standard Android. Just like the Pocket 3, this device comes with the Google Play Store pre-installed, so there's no need to sideload or worry about having access to Google features. With the screen on and the device in my hands, let's talk about the display and build quality. Nothing has changed here with the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. The screen is still a fantastic IPS panel that is bright, sharp, with that higher resolution and very good viewing angles, and the colors are not washed out at different angles. My unit does not have any backlight bleeding, and overall, it looks quite good in person and is definitely going to make games shine, especially with something like PSP emulation. Build quality is still good here as well. No major flexing of the device when I put pressure on it. Everything has a nice finish, all the buttons are responsive and working well. I do not notice any issues on this front. Okay, let's get into the details now and why we are all here, and that's for the games. First, I thought it was appropriate to benchmark both the Retroid Pocket 3 and 3 Plus so we can at least show on paper the performance differences between the UNISOC Tiger 310 and 618 and see how that translates into real-world performance with native Android gaming and emulation. First up, we have Geekbench 5, and as you can see, the 3 Plus scored 384 in single-core and 1447 in multi-core, compared to the 3, which came in at 374 for single-core and 744 for multi-core. Clearly, the 3 Plus is demonstrating a significant performance improvement on the multi-core side, with nearly double the score. Now let's check out how that GPU holds up with 3D Mark's Slingshot Extreme benchmark, and the original Retroid Pocket comes in with an overall score of 401, whereas the new Pocket 3 Plus has a whopping score of 1509, a substantial improvement over its predecessor, and I think we will see this coming through with real-world gameplay tests in just a moment. Okay, so finally let's get into the games. This first part is easily my favorite aspect of these Android-based devices, and if you've been on the channel for a while now, you know I really enjoy native Android gaming. In fact, it was one of my more popular series on the channel covering native Android games, and I'm very excited to continue that with the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus in the future. And if you haven't already checked out those videos, I highly recommend them if you're curious about some really cool native Android games to check out on your Retroid device, which should all work great on the new 3 Plus. So first up, I wanted to do a little throwback to my original Retroid Pocket 3 review and enlist the help of my daughter again to do a comparison. This time around, we're going to demonstrate the performance gaps between the newer 3 Plus and the original Pocket 3. Just a quick note, there will be close-up footage and straight feed later on in this video to better demonstrate the performance differences. Now, one game that wasn't the best performer on the original Pocket 3 was Bloodstained, and immediately I thought it would be a perfect game to show the performance improvement we are getting here. Keep in mind that on the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, I have the game set to medium, whereas on the Retroid Pocket 3, it is set to low.
Do I keep going?
The next game we have is Gunfire Reborn, and the reason I really like this game besides it being a lot of fun is that it makes for a good benchmarking game since it features a built-in frame counter, and I do know that the Retroid devices have a frame counter in the overlay, however I wanted to use a game that had one natively. So here we have a side-by-side comparison of the performance differences between the two devices. This time around, we will use the power of computers and show the clips that I recorded side by side. The game is on the same settings for both devices running at medium with a high frame rate, and it's pretty clear that the Pocket 3 Plus is performing a lot better here, easily running 2 to 3 times more frames than the Pocket 3 at the same settings. This is definitely lending some credibility to the synthetic benchmarking tests and numbers we observed with 3D Mark. And here's a game returning from my Retroid Pocket 3 video. Sky is a fairly demanding game, and on the Retroid Pocket 3 it was certainly playable but never really hit 30 frames per second solid. Here on the 3 Plus it is doing a lot better, and again demonstrates better performance overall on the Android side of things. So let's check out a fairly popular free-to-play game, and one that has certainly been featured on the channel before in a different capacity. Tower of Fantasy is another particularly demanding game on Android, and turning everything way down and setting the FPS cap at 25, you can see that the game runs okay. The cutscenes are incredibly choppy, so you'll probably want to skip those over, but surprisingly, the game is doing alright here despite it not being the best experience visually. Finally, one more very popular free-to-play title, and again another that has been featured here before. Call of Duty Mobile is playing very well here, and for this one, I like using a combination of the touchscreen and built-in controls. I find it makes for a very good experience doing this. As always, I find this game to be a blast despite not playing it a whole lot, and as you can see here, it's working really well on the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus.
Enemy contact! Target down!
Killer drone on standby.
Contact with enemy!
UAV online.
Get down, sniper!
Hunter killer drone deployed.
Now for the next part of this gameplay showcase, let's get into emulation on the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. I'm going to skip most of the earlier generations since this device is capable of much higher end emulation, and so we will demonstrate a little bit of that here in this video. As always, I do have plans to follow up my in-depth look with some emulation showcases in the future, so please keep a lookout for that. So first up, we will start with PSP emulation, which fared pretty well on the Pocket 3, but this time around, I think we're going to be able to push the emulation much further with higher resolutions, and no better way to test that theory than with a fairly easy game to emulate in Loco Roco. However, I went as high as 9 times native resolution, finally paring it back down to 7 times native resolution and settled on that, which is really incredible. Obviously the game looks fantastic here at that resolution and does clean up incredibly well. You'd never know it was a PSP game that was over 15 years old. Next up is probably my favorite racing game on the platform, and Outrun 2006 can be a trickier one to emulate, especially during certain segments and tracks. However, the 3 Plus seems to do pretty well with this one at about 4 times native resolution, with some minor hiccups during well-known harder parts. This is a fairly significant improvement in PSP emulation. I will add that for every PSP game you are seeing, I did not use any type of frame skipping. Finally, my last PSP game that I'll be showing here, and another favorite racing game of mine on the platform. Ridge Racer, like Outrun 2006, is performing really well here at 4 times native resolution. I think it's very obvious that this T618 is bringing some tremendous performance improvements, especially on the PSP front, really letting this device shine with that 16:9 vivid display, turning this into a Super PlayStation Portable of sorts. So let's take a look at something that obviously was much harder and more limited on the Retroid Pocket 3, which was PS2 emulation. Now straight off the bat, I will say that while PlayStation 2 emulation will be improved in some cases, do not expect miracles here. The Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, like its predecessor, is not going to be your PS2 handheld. The reality is that these budget handhelds just don't have enough power to get us up there in terms of acceptable playability from PS2. However, that's not to say that there aren't any games to enjoy here. Since the PS2 library is so vast, it's still surprising how many games will run on this chipset. Additionally, for all of the games demonstrated, I am using the PAL version in Ether SX2 set to the fast, unsafe preset at native resolution. First up is always a favorite of mine, and I remember this one not faring well on the original Pocket 3, so I was hopeful I can make a return to it here, and I can definitely say that there are improvements here with performance. The cutscenes are still a choppy mess, which are easily skippable, but gameplay is pretty smooth. Still not perfect in harder areas, but definitely playable. The control setup on the Retroid Pocket is perfect for a game like this with its dual analog setup, similar to a PlayStation controller. Next up is a game I featured in a Steam Deck video I did on overlooked and hidden gems on the PS2. Frequency is actually the first game from Harmonix and a PS2 exclusive, and I really love revisiting this game occasionally. I was pleasantly surprised to see this one performing really well here. The fact that I'm able to keep up and hit notes fairly consistently is a good sign that this one is emulating well. It's pretty cool to see a favorite of mine from nearly 20 years ago being played on a device this small. What an amazing time to be alive. Finally, sort of playing into that forgotten gems thing, Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver 2 is the fantastic and PS2 and PC exclusive sequel to the original Soul Reaver. I really wish Crystal Dynamics would make a return to this franchise, and the Soul Reaver series in particular. I think Raziel is such a cool character with great development, and the story for these games are also stellar. Anyways, this game was another nice surprise for me that it is running as well as it is here on the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. Now moving on to Gamecube emulation in Dolphin for handheld. So straight off the bat, I will say that there will be no Wind Waker this time around because we know it does pretty well on the original Pocket 3 with that older UNISOC T310. This time around, I wanted to show off games that either play much better now or just flat out surprise me that they played at all on this device. And as I've mentioned many times before, Gamecube is still very much a bonus of this device, but with that Tiger 618, we will definitely be opening up the library a lot more on the Gamecube. So starting out with a popular Nintendo game, Mario Kart Double Dash is essentially running perfectly here using the PAL version and native resolution in the Dolphin for handheld build that comes pre-installed with the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. This is performing really well here. I mean, I'm able to drift around corners and I'm not noticing any slowdown or stuttering, so this is a really nice experience on here, and at the screen size, the game looks fantastic. So I was going through my list of GameCube games, and Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time immediately caught my eye as one that I need to try out on the 3 Plus and see if it will run. I absolutely adore this game, and even back when it was released, I felt it was so overlooked, which it was, but I'm glad that the series finally took off and we ended up getting sequels, and now apparently a reboot or remake of sorts is being planned. Anyways, this is another game that is running very well here on the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, and another interesting fact that this game never received a mobile port, unlike the sequels in the series which ended up on PlayStation Portable. And one more GameCube game to round out the list, and another one that completely shocked me for how well it is running here. Now, it's not completely perfect, but regardless, I think this is one of the more demanding games given the incredible visuals on display here. Wave Race is another game and franchise that I really enjoy and sorely miss today. I really wish Nintendo would dust this franchise off and bring it back on a modern platform. Now, not to carry on here, but as you can see, Wave Race Blue Storm is great, however, clearly my skills at this game are not.
On the left. Yes! That's the way. Awesome. You just turned the turbo. Yes!
So naturally, with more processing power on hand here, and Dolphin for handheld also capable of running Wii games, it's only natural that one would wonder if Wii is a possibility here. And again, this device is not going to play Wii games to that extent. In fact, I'd say it's a fun curiosity here on the Retroid Pocket, and really should not be a selling point at all. Now, I do believe a lot of less demanding WiiWare titles will do alright, and so here I have the original Fast Racing from Shinin running decently on the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. It's definitely exciting because we are starting to get into higher end emulation with these lower cost handhelds, and the future is certainly going to be exciting with what's possible. Finally, the last emulation test on this device, and one that shows great promise in general, is Switch emulation with Skyline on Android. It really is amazing how far this emulator has progressed in such a short time, to the point that something like the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus can start to handle some of the easier to emulate games available on Switch. So I decided to test a fantastic game, and easily on my list of favorites is Celeste. And it is really running very well here. Without emulation, we would not have any ability to enjoy this great game on this device or on the Android platform. And so again, this is one reason why emulation is great, because it opens an additional library of games, albeit a small one, because like Wii Emulation, this is more of a glimpse into the future with these budget handhelds. However, I do have plans to further investigate Switch emulation on the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, and let everyone know about some games that will be good experiences here. Now after all of this gaming, I always like to take the surface temperature of the device. As you can see here, the device is staying under 40 degrees Celsius, and on the back side it feels a little bit warm to the touch, but also stays under 40 degrees Celsius. The large heatsink is doing a good job dispersing heat across the entire device, keeping things fairly consistent temperature-wise. Lastly, let's see how the battery life fares in the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, and also see how it compares to the original Pocket 3. As always, I like to start off with a little bit lighter fare, so here is some Super Nintendo emulation and my go-to battery testing game, Yoshi's Island. As you can see, the original Pocket 3 did a little over 9 hours with 50% brightness, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth turned off, and volume set to about 20%. Very solid performance from a device and battery of this size. The Pocket 3 Plus finally joined its older brother at around the 10-hour, 38-minute mark. Now on the high end of battery testing, I used Bloodstained on both devices, and things were fairly even between the two. As in the prior test, both devices were set to 50% brightness with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth turned off and volume set to about 20%. The 3 Plus was able to get 5 hours and 20 minutes, and the original 3 only lasted about 10 minutes more. Now you might be wondering, shouldn't the Pocket 3 Plus last longer with it having the larger battery capacity? And I'd say not necessarily. In this case, from the specs I could pull on the T618, the chipset does have a higher TDP threshold, so it will draw more power from that battery, and in this case I do think the device is being pushed harder, as Bloodstained has been a challenge for these handhelds. Regardless, I do think performance is quite respectable given the performance of the T618, size of the device, and the size of the battery. And so, just like every video before this one, we are at the end of my in-depth look on the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. I think for many, the first thought that comes to mind is, should I consider buying this if I already own a Retroid Pocket 3? And of course, that is a very tricky thing to answer. On one hand, there's no hiding the fact that the Pocket 3 launched a little more than 3 months ago, and if you were like me and bought one on day one, or any point after that, you might feel a little bit of bitterness about your device seeming obsolete so soon. However, I want to say that the Retroid Pocket 3 is still a very solid device and performer for its price point, and everything you enjoy on that device can still be enjoyed, and nothing changes that fact. I'd say that it's less of a value proposition to upgrade from the 3 to the 3 Plus. It's certainly more capable and powerful, but if you own the Pocket 3, I don't think there's necessarily a need to dive right in unless you genuinely want that extra performance for slightly better Gamecube, PlayStation 2, PSP emulation, and Android performance. Now, if you're someone who's had the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus for a while and are looking for something newer that has better build quality, a better screen, and much more power, then yes, it's probably best to skip the 3 and go for the 3 Plus, which is only about $30 more, and gives you a lot for that extra amount. At the end of the day, the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus is an outstanding performer at its price point, and brings to the table one of the best all-around packages that you can get. So what do you think about the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus? Do you own one already? Are you considering purchasing one or upgrading to it? Let me know down in the comments, and I look forward to interacting with everyone as always. Thank you for staying with me through the end of this video. I am the Retro Tech Dad, and thank you so much for watching.